I'm going to put new head gaskets on my Craftsman GT5000 with a 25 horsepower Kohler engine, and there's a very good video made by Terrell on YouTube that shows how to do this. And what I'm going to show basically is just the difference. There's little differences in his engine and mine, the engine that he did the repair on and mine, just slight differences. So I'm just going to begin taking this apart according to, I'm following a list that I got off Terrell's video, and then I'm bagging everything up in baggies, the parts. So I have it's going to take me more than a day to do this, so I want to keep them all contained. Okay, so I'm going to start stripping this down. Well, one difference I notice right off the bat is on this engine, the throttle cables are down here below the engine, and on the video that I watched from Terrell, they're mounted up here. So that might actually be easier to take off with the throttle cables going down below here. And once I got these fan cover bolts loose, I just put a piece of tape over them to hold them in place while I lifted it up. And you can see that you can see it on Terrell's video too, that there's inserts that go into these bolt holes, and they end up just sitting here. So if you lift it up carefully, then you can grab them without them falling off down inside your engine. So there's a couple bolts right above the right hand head here that are holding the shroud, and these are going into the aluminum, and they're tight. So what I've done is I just barely dribbled some PB Blaster on here, just barely dribbled it on there to let it work its way back in there before I take those out, because I don't want to wreck those. I did the same thing. There's a one in behind the oil filler spout, and I also did on the oil filler spout, so when I take it out. But you don't want to overuse PB Blaster on anything like this, so you just barely let it dribble out the end, and it'll work its way down the threads then. And when you get a bolt that's tight in aluminum like this, what you want to do usually is work it out enough where you can see the threads in there, and then squirt a little lubricant on the threads, and then work it back in, and let the lubricant go onto the threads, and then work it back out. Don't try and just force it out, because you're liable to end up stripping your threads. And when you remove your oil filler tube, I would take in that open hole that goes into your crankcase there, I'd put a rag in there or something just to keep things from going in there, from dropping in there. And you could see with my cover off how grubby this engine is underneath there. I'm going to take some time and clean up all this stuff on these electrical wires. I might try and add a little bit of touch of grease right to that tip of that starter there. This one's really corroded. I'm going to try and clean this all up. And maybe clean off the side of the flywheel even where it's all rusted. This is where the magnet crosses here, right here, so that's really corroded in there. See if I can clean this up some way. And the manifold's really grubby too. Oh, well, that's what I'm taking it apart for. It kind of appears that right there's a tiny crack even in this cable. So I might be replacing this piece here. Right there at the tip of the pin, it looks like a crack to me. So on this model, I'm not sure this, because the throttle cable connectors are down here, the throttle linkages are going down this way to here. And with the manifold loose, I won't be able to rotate it onto top of the engine to fold it back this way because this rod here is holding it. And this rod doesn't have a release down here. So I might have to end up taking this nut off here. I'm not sure yet. This rod does have a plastic snap release down in here. And it doesn't appear that I would be able to fold this forward either. I might try that. Okay, so I'm going to release this clip down here that's controlling the choke. And then I might have to release this wire loom back here. And once that's loose, I may be able to rotate this forward and keep this throttle link just connected right here. It depends if I can rotate this around this link right here enough to let it drop forward. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is take this, whatever this ground wire that goes to the top of the carburetor, whatever that's for, I'm going to take that out and then pull this carburetor off the manifold, and that'll allow me to swivel this point around on the throttle rod, and then I can just take the carburetor off. Because actually, like I said, I want to get back in here to clean all this stuff that's under the manifold anyway. I can also see where I think it appears that this might have head bolts instead of head nuts, so I got to see if those bolts can be reused or not. I'm not sure if you're supposed to reuse head bolts on this or not. Okay, so see if I can find a screwdriver that'll fit this. And there's also an electrical connection right here that needs to be unplugged, and then the manifold can be moved backwards away from the carburetor, and the carburetor can be swiveled and taken off this throttle point right here. Okay, so that lets me get the carburetor out of the way, and now I can go ahead and get these shroud bolts out of here. That's not a shroud bolt, that's something else. Looks like maybe the way I get into the crank or something. So I'll go ahead and get these shrouds off, and then I'll see if I can get the valve covers off. So there's one shroud bolt that's back in here you can get to by running an extension under this throttle assembly, but this throttle assembly is going to have to come off anyway, I think, because it's on this side it's bolted to the head. I think it goes across. It looks like part of it comes across here and it's bolted to the head on this side. So to get the heads off, I'm going to have to unbolt this throttle assembly and drop it down anyway. Drop it down, and it's enough that I can clear the heads at least. So getting these the bolts off this throttle linkage assembly underneath the head, there's bolts under here. What I found fits in there because the space is tight is a 10 millimeter. This is a brake wrench, which is a heavy duty box-in wrench. I can get a lot of leverage on these things. Probably one of those ratchet in wrenches that are a ratchet built into it would work good too. And I've soaked these up with a lot of PB Blaster on them too, to get them loose. So this shrouding was like this, with this part going here. And then the bolt came in from the bottom. This throttle plate went on top like this. And this throttle assembly went down there with these bolts at the bottom of the heads. These going to the bottom of the heads. I'm just going to leave this lay down here like that if I can. And then next I got to see if I can get the manifold bolts off the bottom. Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and pull this starter off here because this plate just can't get around there. It just doesn't have enough room to get around there, and you have to get it off to actually get to the head bolts. Get this plate out of the way. And since there's only two of these, I think I'll go ahead and just pull that off anyway. Okay, so I didn't have to take completely off. I just loosened it up enough that I could move the starter back here a little bit, give it enough room to get through. So this muffler here, I'm not sure if these pipes are loose in here. They almost look like they have a flange, a spot welding them in maybe. And this looks like it can unbolt it, but that slips under here. Right here it slips under that piece, so you can't go that direction with it, with the muffler, even if it's unbolted really. So I'm going to have to take these pipes off the heads and then see which direction this thing will move around. Oh, there's my old this is my old PTO cable. My PTO cable got caught one time and it ripped it off. And I never could find it. I can see it's down in here. I can see the plug to it. So that's where it went after all those years. Oh well, now I got an extra plug-in. Okay, so it's getting late and starting to rain, so I'm gonna button this up for today, and then I'll come back and work on it some more tomorrow. I'll give those exhaust flange bolts some time to soak up, and I also got to find a wrench that fits in there. Okay, so to be continued.